In this chapter, we'll see some of the basics that I use for ZBrush. This is not an introductory course for ZBrush, so you should have some basics of the software for now. But what I would take you through is a bit of which brushes I use, and we will do some quick exercise to get our hands loose. So we will be all ready with a bit of practice before we start in the face. So what I do always when I open the file is I go to new document to scale the window here. And what I will do now is I will go here to the spotlight, and I will take maybe, for example, this dog. I like this dog to start sometimes, so to play. And what we'll take you through is a bit of which are the brushes that I use in general. So I have some shortcuts for the brushes, but what I use the most is in general, like when you press B, the keyboard, you will have this quick pick of the brushes. So what I do is, for example, I press BMT, let's go back, BMT, and then we'll have the move topological brush, for example. So these are really nice brush that I like to use, where what you do here is different with the normal move brush, you can move without affecting the rest of the topology. Let's say if you have, for example, for the eyes is really good in general. So for example, if you would have the eyes together like this, if you use the normal move brush, so for example, if you press B, M, and then you go to B, so B and B, that one I have a shortcut, so that's why, sorry, I didn't got it in my head so fast. With that one, if you want to move the eye, you will move the entire thing. But if you do BMT to do the move topological, like when you move, you will move only the side that you want to move without affecting the other one. So basically what it does is it has a fall-off that it goes through the topology and not through the entire surface. So I think, again, like the move topological is a brush that I use quite a lot. So let's fix the eye of this guy back. I will turn on symmetry here. And another brush that I use a lot is the clay buildup. So if you do B clay build, and then you go to where is it? So it's BCB, if I'm not wrong again. So let's say BCB, and I have clay buildup. And this is the brush that I think I use the most with the move brush. So for example, let's subdivide this mesh a bit. And what I love about this brush, let's go a bit, subdivide it a bit more. What I love about this brush is that it gives a bit of texture. So when you are sculpting, you will have, especially for example, if you sculpt a skin and stuff like that, a face, you will have already some texture to it. So then, for example, you can smooth, and let's go back here. So this is one of the brushes that I use the most. So if you go in a lower subdivision, it's increase without going too hard. And what I do in general is I reduce the intensity. So I work, for example, in like 10 or 8 or something like that. And if I want to, for example, I work like this, and I try to go opposite to the direction, like perpendicular to the direction where I'm going with this. And I think, I don't know, you shouldn't take this as like, oh, you need to use this brush. I think it's a matter of getting used to one. And in general, for example, I use like only a few brushes. I use like maybe 4 or 5 and not more than that. And I think that's not a big deal in general. Like you should try to see which brush do you feel comfortable and do it like that. Like honestly, there are some artists that for the same thing that I'm doing here, they will use the standard brush or clay tubes. So it's a matter of preferences. Like, honestly, I'm just telling you which brushes I use, but then is your pick what you will do. So another of the brushes is the standard brush. That is more when I need to, for example, do something a bit sharper. In this case, or when let me subdivide here a bit more. So for example, if I work in wrinkles, I do a mix between the standard brush and the dumb standard. So this I think is a really nice brush also. So for example, if we do like this, and then you do with the standard brush, you can define shapes like this, for example, to do a scar or something like that. I think dumb standard and the standard brush, I think, are a nice combination together. And for example, if I would need to do some wrinkles, also, as I mentioned before, I will go to the dumb standard that I have as a shortcut in the 5. So let's say that we go here. It's not subdivided enough. Let me go a bit more. So let's say that I have here this a bit too strong. So I will reduce intensity a bit. And what I will do is I will do it smaller. So let's say that I do this wrinkle here. Then I will go a bit more detail of how to do wrinkles. And here I'm doing it quite quick just to introduce the brushes. But for example, I do like that. Then I use the standard brush to, this again is too strong. I go a bit lower. Standard brush to make this a bit more defined. And then what I will do also is to use the pinch brush and to get this a bit more pinched, let's say. Again, this I'm doing it quite fast. It's not really doing a wrinkle, but just to show you some of the brushes that I use. So honestly, summarizing, I use more or less that brushes. So would be the Move Topological. Let me go a bit in lower subdivision. So I use the Move Topological, the normal move brush, depending of what I'm trying to do. Then if you press Shift, you do a smooth on the surface, so that I use it also quite a lot. I try to not smooth a lot, but at the end, especially for faces, like you will end using it so you have like more a smooth feeling, but try to use it without removing details. So while we create the face, then we will go a bit more in detail of like how I use each of these brushes and why they are so important, each of them. So then summarizing again, Move Topological, normal move brush, clay buildup, standard brush. That was a bit low intensity. Standard brush, dumb standard. Let me go a couple of subdivisions more. Dumb standard, and the pinch brush, let's say. That's some of the most. Then there are other brushes, and if you press B here, you will find a lot of different options. So you will see in our way that I might use some of the other ones, but in general, they are the ones that I just show you. So what I want you to do now is, it's important to, like what I like to do sometimes is to get my hand loose before going into the face itself, for example. So in this case, I will take whatever shape you want. You can take like the sphere or the cylinder. Saying, let's take the sphere, for example, or remove the floor, because it annoys me a bit. Anyway, you can see from this head here the direction. I think that's cool. And what I do in general is I start, for example, if I would do a face. Oh, sorry, I forgot about something. Like at the moment when you start here with one of these primitives, you need to make polymesh 3D first, before, if not, it won't allow you to sculpt. So then, for example, I go to the move or the move topological. Let's go to the front, checking this face. And then what I do is I start, let's say, with symmetry, and I start working on the face, like just really rough things. But what I want you to do now is not to try to do a face itself, but to get a bit loose with the brushes. So for example, take the clay buildup or clay tubes and start creating something, whatever you want, something that is not defined at all. So I really don't know what I will create here, but so if you start like just playing around, I think this will help you to get your hands loose, and then at the moment of jumping to the face, you will have a bit more of like it's a bit of the same when you draw. I'm not great at drawing, but when I start drawing something, I start doing, for example, if this will be, let's go here to a cube, for example. Here to a cube, make polymesh 3D, and let's subdivide here a bit. So for example, if this will be a canvas of drawing and I will have a pencil, what I will start doing some straight lines. So like this, I start getting my hand loose or doing some circles. So this is a horrible circle, I need to say. But in this way, for example, when we do it with pencil, or to do like continuous lines, stuff, this is a way how you get your hand loose. So in a case like this, for example, let's do a Dynamesh here, and just take over this, just take one of the primitives and start playing with it, play a bit with Zremesh, Dynamesh. Sorry, I'm using these shortcuts here, but as I mentioned, you should have a base of ZBrush before doing this. So here, if you go to geometry, and you have here divide for the divide, and then you have Zremesh here if you want to use it, and Dynamesh. I think I got a bit lost. Where is Dynamesh at the moment? But yeah, I should have the shortcut here. That's a bit of the problem of working with your own shortcuts that I've been working for so long that I really don't know where is Dynamesh at the moment. But as I mentioned, you should have a bit of that base and search for it yourself. So, well, in this case, we have this cube that is zero meshed. We will subdivide it a bit, and as I mentioned, just play a bit with it, play with the different brushes, do some crazy stuff that you want to do, like, I don't know, don't try to follow anything here, just take the different brushes and play with it. And you will get a bit the hand relaxed for then jumping to the next lesson where we will start creating a face. For this lesson and to finish this chapter, what I will give you is a small exercise. What you need to do is from a sphere, like remember to make polymesh 3D, but I want you to start working on a face, spend a few hours, like maybe, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 hours trying to create a face, but from your imagination. Don't look at any picture or any proportions from anatomy, anything. Just start sculpting. Start sculpting, like if you will have a piece of clay, and start sculpting the face, how it comes to your mind. So again, like don't follow anything specific. Using the brushes that I gave you, just start defining the head. And let me dynamesh this quick, subdivide it. For example, a nice tip is to do the neck. What I do is this a bit too in the back, but so I mask it, and then I this, for example. But so what I want you to do is to create a face, but without following anything in particular and without looking any references. Like keep dynameshing, so and keep in kind of a low resolution. That's a nice tip in general. But start creating a head and a bit of the bust just from what it comes to your head. And then what we will do is at the end of the course, we will compare this head that you created first with the head, the final head that you will have at the end of the course, and we will see if there was really a good improvement. Now in Photoshop, what we will do is we will bring copy paste from our ZRemesher, two of the reference, one from the side, one from the front, sorry, and one from the side. And what we will do here is we'll align more or less the references. So what I will do is I will reduce the opacity of the top one. I'll go here. I'll make it more or less the same height. I will rotate it. So it's more or less, I tend to align the eyes and the top of the head and the chin. So there we go. This is more or less the angle. So if you see, if I reduce the opacity a bit, you can see that the eyes are more or less in the same line, the nose is more or less in the same line, chin, sorry, and the top of the head, they are more or less in the same line. So we will use this like this. We will align it here, here, and we'll have more or less in position. Pressing Shift will bring it to the side. We will return the opacity to the maximum, and then what I will do is I will take this image to the front, and I will make these two images bigger so they cover the entire space. Okay. So what I will do next is to check with the guides if the height are more or less where we need it in the key proportions of the face. So as we mentioned before in the proportions video, like the eyes should be more or less in the half of the head, between the top of the head and the chin. So we have this here, this is more or less aligned. What I will do is I will take this image, and I will make it slightly bigger so I can align it here, and I will rotate a bit this side, and there we go. So there we have the eyes in the same line. Then we will have the bottom of the nose. Here, this again, this is not aligned, so I will keep rotating this to make it match. It won't match exactly because there are like completely different pictures in different angles. So as you can see, this is not going to match perfectly, but this will be good enough for the process of making the blockout in ZBrush. And as we are not doing exactly this guy, so this is not a likeness, I'm not going to go super in detail in aligning every part of the face, but this will allow us to work as a reference in ZBrush to have the basic proportions. And then we will adjust it to match more the concept that we have and not so much his face itself. Even if I really like this reference here, because it has a really nice contrast and you can see really define all the shapes of the head itself. For example, the cheekbone is really defined here, the jaw, like the forehead, and these wrinkles on the foreheads that are really nice. But the problem with this picture is it's not really aligned in the same angle of this one. So for example, we were talking about that the nose doesn't match. What I will do is I will keep this reference image for a future stage for all the secondary shapes. And what I will do is I brought this image that is it matches a bit better the age of him during this one, I think. And it really matched the angle. So what I did is I aligned these to have it more straight. And then I check that the nose is in the same line. And for example, the mouth is in the same line also. So what we will do is we will use this as our main reference for the first blockout. Again, this is not a likeness of him, so we don't need to match everything exactly, but it will serve us as a base to have the main shapes blocked, and then we will use the reference to follow with more the face that we want to do. Okay, now we will start with the fun part of the process. We are already in ZBrush, and this is what I love to do the most, honestly. So when we are here in ZBrush, we'll start blocking out this character. What I do in general is I start with a sphere or a cylinder, but in this case I will start with a sphere. As I mentioned before, we can see here the head, and I start always like a bit from the front, looking here. I put here my references from ZRemesher, but I'm not going to use these to, let's say, to lay it on top until by now. I will just have it as a reference here, or you can have it in your second monitor. And what I like to do is at the beginning to start blocking out these without following exact proportions, but more to do it by eye at the beginning. So I train my eye in that way. And I think it's the best way to learn and to start understanding that proportions. So what I will do first is I will go to make polymesh 3D. And then here, you do Shift F, you see that the mesh from this sphere is really not great, because we have all these condensed polygons here. And this is not good to work on, to sculpt like a face or something like this. So what I will do is I will go here in a bit lower resolution in the Dynamesh. And I will start, I think with this should be okay. As I mentioned before, here I have like all my shortcuts, but if you go here to geometry, Dynamesh, you can press Dynamesh here. So, and the resolution here. So I'm just used to having buttons everywhere and not using the default, but you can follow this one. So when we are here, we have the sphere, and what I will start to do is I will do to the move topological or move brush. You can use any of them. I will activate symmetry, and I will start making the X shape at the beginning. So I like to go first from the front and then a bit from the side, and start giving a bit of this shape, as you see. So if we just sit here from the side, see the shape of the head. So I start like this. Then I give a bit of this egg shape. I make it a bit flatter in the side. And then this, it doesn't have like to be exactly like this, but what I try to do is also, if I go to my down standard, I try to do a line like in the, more or less in the middle of the head, where here we will have the eyes. So then I press 3 to go to the clay buildup, and I start working out the eye sockets. Then this will change for sure, but at least to have a reference. Then I work the nose, just to have an idea. Again, until now I'm checking all these by eye, and I'm not going to, then we will check the proportions later, but this by eye until now. And then what I do for the mouse is I go again to the 3, and I do this a bit like this, smooth it a bit so the mouse goes a bit forward. And then with the 5, I will smooth it a bit here. And I think we are starting more or less okay at this point. Then something really important at this point is to start defining the neck. So what I do for that is pressing Ctrl. Pressing Ctrl, I will mask this area here. Maybe that's a bit too in the back. I will mask it up a bit more forward here. And then press Ctrl and click outside to invert the mask. And then what I will do with the transpose master, pressing the W, I will bring this outside here. It's not perfect, and then we'll change this, but we have this we have an extrusion now. As you see here, until now, it's not looking anything like a proper human head, but starting slowly and it will start getting shape. So what I like to do at this point is to press Ctrl and slide outside with the mouse. So I do again a Dynamesh. And as you can see here, like now all the polygons, if we press Shift F, all the polygons got a bit more proportional. So I can keep sculpting in this mesh much better. So let me press Shift F again. Go back to my move topological or move brush, again, as you want. And I will start adjusting this a bit. So defining the shape of the head, as you see here. The neck, even if you think is straight, the neck is not so straight. And you can see it has a bit of a bend always. I define a bit the back part, and then I will start giving a bit of shape from the shoulders. So I smooth it a bit at this point, so we'll start here. And then what I like to do is start shaping with, if we press Alt while we are sculpting with the clay buildup, it will remove instead of adding. And here what I will do is I will remove a bit more, smooth it, and then start adding this a bit too much. I will reduce the intensity of this brush, and I will start adding a bit of the sternocleidomastoid here that is connected to this side. So at least I'm starting, again, this will change completely with time, but at least I'm starting having this shape of the neck. And then something important is to start defining the ear. So what I do is, again, I really like using clay buildup, and the ear, I do it like more or less in the same line of the eyes here. So what you have two options for this, or you do it with clay buildup, and you start going out with the eye, with the ear, or another option is to do the same technique that I did for the same technique that I did for the neck. So I will do like this. I will define this area here, do like this, and then with the transform master, this going out, and this going a bit back here. And at the moment it looks terrible, but you will see that with time it will start looking nice. Okay, so remove the mask, Dynamesh again, and this is looking terrible at the moment. So what we will do, we'll start, as you see, this is like really an egg shape at the moment, and the head is not an egg shape, it has, like, if we would define here like a ball, let's say, so this is a ball, this is a sphere, that this will be the sphere, and then we have the jaw that comes like this. So what we will do here is, I will come like this, start flatten this up a bit. And as you see, until now, I'm working without perspective. So if you see, the perspective changed quite a lot, the shape. but I like to work at the beginning without perspective to have the proportions more or less right. And let me go back to the move topological. Clay build up and stuff like this. Something important that if you do the face mask, back face mask, you won't affect the back part, as you see before. If you don't have it, if you don't have this clicked, you will see that when you sculpt here, all the back will get deformed. So if you press back face mask, that if I'm not wrong is here in brush, auto masking and back face mask, you can find it here. So here what we will do is I will smooth this a bit more. Go here. This is just to define a bit the shape of the ear. Not that I'm not spending a lot of time here, because what we want is to have the head, the main shapes of the head done correctly. So what I do here, as I was mentioning here, we have like kind of a sphere in the back. So I'm trying to define this point. Come here, start defining a bit more the neck here. And then what I will do is I will start defining the jaw that comes from the back of the ear and gets a bit more defined like this. So come here. Again, this is a slow process, and there is some artists that they can do this shape like much faster and have something that already looks human quite fast. It's not my case. I'm more in the, I like to sculpt slow and start testing out, and with time we will get the shape that we want. So this, as you see, we're starting to get slowly the shape. What I like to do also is to go to the top view of the skull, because see, at the moment in general when we start sculpting heads, like the first thing we will have is that we will have this super flat, and the cranium is more like an egg shape from this side. So what we will do is we'll start adjusting that here. So it's a bit wider in the back. As you see, if you see here in this planar head from ZBrush, you can see. So it's a bit like this. This will change again in the future, but at least we are getting the main shape done. So see, and slowly the heads start to get a bit more shape. So then I'll go back a bit to the mouse. I will make it a bit more forward, and then this will be what will define the head, the mouse, sorry. Then we come here. I press 5 to go to the dump standard to start defining slowly a bit more the ear. But again, this will be more defined later. At the moment, it's just to have this shape here. Then go back to the sternocleidomastoid to get this muscle here, connect it from here. So slowly, as we see, doesn't look like anything great yet. But again, what I always say, this is a process that takes a bit of time. Something that is important here is that we need to work always in a low resolution. So, because if we imagine that we subdivide this mesh a lot and we start trying to move it around, like you don't have enough control. So if you work in a low subdivision, like it's much easier to remove, like to fix things that you did wrong and adjust the mesh as you want. So what we will do is we'll define a bit here. The eye sockets, we start defining here the bone. Cheekbone slowly, the jaw. As you see now, it's a bit exaggerated everything, but slowly, slowly, you start getting shape. As we were seeing in the planar head, we have kind of an bird shape here, but then see, if we see, I always like to see it from the top, always. If we see here, we have really this pointing out, all this part of the nose. So what I will do is, I'll come here and start getting this a bit more inside at the moment. As you see, there is not really a special rule of how to do it, but we start getting the shape. And as again, at this point, we are just trying to get the proportions right and slowly start get to something. Let's adjust a bit the cranium, that at the moment this is looking a bit flat here. Define a bit more the shape of the cranium here. This gets a bit, there we go. So as you see here, we start getting the proportions slowly, a bit better. Defining the shape of the jaw, as you see here. And then what I like to do a bit at this point is, when we were talking about the proportions and how the head is divided in half, the ears are half of the face, and then the face is divided in three, from the hairline until here. What I like to do is, at this point that everything is super rough and you don't have the shapes really defined, start getting just the super primary shapes. Here, what I like to do is I go here to the preferences, and when we go, if you press, for example, W, you go to the transpose, and you have two options. Or you have, if you press Y, you change to the gizmo, and you press Y again, you change to the transpose master. So at this point, I like to use the transpose master to measure. So for example, what I will do is I will take from the top of the head until the chin, and we will have, this is a unit of measure, right, at the moment. So sorry, let's go back here. From here to here, and what I do is I go to preferences, transpose units, and then here in calibration distance I will put 1 and enter. So if you see now, we have from the top of the head until the chin, we have 1 unit. See, for example, this is 1 unit from here to here. So for example, if we will be doing the entire body, it's always good to measure the head first. So we have then all the proper proportions with the head measures. Like then when we do the course on the full body, we'll go through that. But so at the moment, what we will do is we will measure from the top of the head until the chin. And we will see that here, half of the head is in the eyes. So we are right with that proportion here. And then what I will do is I will take or press Q to go back to the brushes, and 5 in my case to go to the dump standard, or B, D, S to dump standard. Here I will do a small mark here to define the hairline. And then from here, what I will do is I will take the transpose master again, sorry, transpose master, and I will measure from here to the chin, and I will go again to preferences, transpose unit, and I will press 3. So at this point, what we have is like, we start defining this. So as I was saying, here we have from the hairline to the eyebrows, we have 1 unit. From the eyebrows to the nose, we have another unit. And from the nose to the chin, from the bottom of the nose to the chin, we have another unit. So in this case, I'm realizing that I have the eyebrows a bit too high. So what I will do is I will go to the move brush or move topological, and I will go a bit lower here. So starting to get a bit better proportions. So then I will start working a bit more the ears because they are going a bit too out. And defining a bit more the head. In this case, we want the chin to be a bit thinner, as you see here. He has this a bit more defined. And then we'll start defining slightly more the nose here, because this guy has a kind of a wide nose. We'll define it like this. This may be a bit too much. So what I will do is I'll come here, this. So again, at this point, this is just a blockout to start getting the proportions right. I'll start defining a bit more here the jaw. And again, the sternocleidomastoid that goes here. Also, I'm feeling that everything is going a bit too forward here. And as you see here, this curve of the head, you see here in the reference in the bottom, is not so prominent. So what I will do is I will move this a bit forward. Start defining the chin here a bit more. I will move it a bit forward because a bit to the top, because I think I remove a bit the proportions that we have. And with the clay build-up, start defining everything slightly more here. So as you see, this is just, it looks a bit like a mask and not a face yet, but starting to get like the right proportions. Smoothing a bit. I will start defining a bit more the neck here. So I like to go a bit inside here to define more this muscle. And then here the Adam apple will start going a bit outside, because at the moment everything is a bit too inside. And then here in the bottom we will define this hole that we have in the neck. And start defining slowly. This will change completely. Start defining a bit more the muscles of the chest. So if you see, something important here is that some people tend to do this like this, too flat. And we have, all of us, we have this area here that is, the show is not that it's finished like this. We all have this shape going a bit down. So at the moment it's a bit too much here. So I will go with the Adam apple a bit here, and I will push this a bit like this to the top, to the front, sorry. Let's define a bit more of these muscles again. this doesn't look great now. So I try to not use a lot of Ctrl-C in general in my process. For sure, sometimes I use it, but when, for example, I see that something, for example, I did this and it got too bad, what I try to do is to try to fix it up. That gives me a bit of practice, so to know how to fix things. And I just keep going. So don't be afraid to break stuff, because it's a good practice always to get used to it. So at the moment, the neck is a bit too long. Let me go a bit more to top. Find this a bit more here. This, if we see from the back, is a bit too wide. And we will give a bit more volume here to the jaw. And I think this has started to get a bit more defined. Okay, so what we will do from now is like do this like at this level. Again, I don't want to go in details at this point. So go until here. And let me fix a bit this ear that looks a bit like an elf. And go back to Dynamesh. So try to block out a head to this point where you start getting like the feeling that the proportions are right. Again, try, for example, here. See, again, the egg shape from the top, it got lost. So what I will do is I will start adjusting a bit the cranium again. And again, what I was saying is that until now, just work on these kind of proportions, like just get the first proportions of the face, of the entire head, and get something super block out, nothing really defined at the moment. So, and after this, I will start working on, let me, here, sorry, to the move brush. So after this, what I will do is I will start working on more in a time-lapse way. So I will record the entire process and then I will talk through and do it in like a bit faster than it is, maybe 2 or 3 times faster than what I'm doing, because as I mentioned before, to create this is a slow process, and it's if I record everything in real time and talking on top all the time, like it will take ages and you will get bored and doesn't make sense. So what I will do is from now on, I will record the entire process and then I will have a time lapse telling you what I'm doing in each part. And I think it's the best way for you to learn this process, and you keep going and using that techniques that I'm using to create your character head. So see you in the next lesson. At this point, when we have the main blockout done, we will start to adjust a bit the shape and start giving a bit more of a personality to this head. So again, as you see here, I'm starting adjusting the back of the head and the eyebrows, adjusting the shape of the skull. That's really important. Then giving a bit more volume to the bottom of the chin, of the jaw. And as you see here, like I'm going not focusing in one place for a really long time, but moving from one part of the head to another one. So here working a bit of the nasal labial. Then adjusting a bit the proportions and the shape. As you see in the reference in the bottom left, you can see how the head is a bit more square than what it was before. So now I'm adjusting that. Starting defining the mouse. And as you see, what I did with the mouse is I added volume first, and then I did the middle line, and then I started creating the shape. Also, as you see here, there is a volume in the right and left from the mouse that is important to have there. And slowly I'm getting the shape. As you see again, like there is not focusing just in one part for a really long time, but touching over different part of the head until I'm happy with the shape, and then I come back later to that area. What is important here is to have the proportions right and start getting the shape that without any detail, like you start perceiving that is a real human, not a real human head yet, but to start getting the right proportions. Now I like to define the lips. I do it with the dump standard, and then I smooth it a bit. So we define the top and the bottom border, and then with the smooth brush I remove a bit that definition, because nothing in the head and in the face is too sharp as what that dump standard gives you. But as you see now, you can start seeing a bit more the shape of the mouse there, of the lips. Then here I'm defining the shape of the nose in the side. The nose, I will do a lot of interactions in the nose, I think, because the nose is a bit in the middle way between my reference and the concept. So that I think I will go a bit back and forwards between both of them to see which works better. Something important with these guys, as he's like a mixed race, he has really prominent lips, and that's important to get right. So as you see, before I open a bit and I did the lips a bit bigger, and now I'm working on the side of the head to give that volume that we mentioned before. Now I'm adjusting a bit the shape of the nose again. As you see, slowly it's getting a bit more defined, everything, but still we are in a process of blockout. Now I'm digging a bit the holes in the nose. That's important to do at the stage of while we're still working with Dynamesh, because we can always update the Dynamesh and the topology will adjust, even if we will do the topology after, but it's good to start defining the stuff. Like the same here where I will start defining the eyes. As you see here, there are different ways to do the eyes, but what I started doing that I regretted is to start defining the eyes with the shape first. And then I realized that it's better to put the eyeball. So now I import the eyeball and I position them in the right place. And this is something essential at the moment of placing the eyes and getting the eyes right. Is we always have, the eyeball is not a perfect sphere, but as you see here, I'm starting to get the shape of the eyeball because it's a sphere and it has like a small bump on the front. But it's important to get that eyeball there, because if you try to do the head without the eyeball, in general we tend to do the eyes super flat and the entire shape of the eyeball will be wrong. So I like to put the eyeball there and then a sculpt on top, as you can see here. Now I'm sculpting from the top and the bottom of the eyeball, so I can start getting the shape right. As you can see here, until now, I've been working in orthographic, And now I jump to work in perspective. Now that when I had the proportions more or less in position how I want it, like with the standard proportions of a human head, what we were talking before about the five eyes wide and how the head is proportioned. But now I jumped already to perspective because the final render will be in perspective, and it's better to work in perspective and in a similar focal length that you will use for the final render. So in my case, I'm using maybe 70 or 85 in general for a bust, because that's what a portrait picture would be. So I'm trying to match as much as I can to reality. So in this case, I chose, I think, 85, and I keep working in perspective. So I have, see, here I'm change from perspective to orthographic to see how the proportions are right, if the proportions are right, but then I keep working in perspective during the entire rest of the process. Here starting defining the bottom part of the eye, the bottom eyelid. And slowly I'm getting a bit of that volume that it has. As you can see in the left, using always the reference, the real reference and the reference from the concept to try to get the shape as close as I can to them. At this point I'm starting defining a bit more the eyes, the eyelids itself, because they were looking a bit too flat, and adding volume below the eyebrows. That's something really important. A lot of artists tend to do that really flat, and it's important at that because of how the skin folds there. Like you always, or most of people have a fold in that area, and that grows, or I wouldn't say grow, but that falls a bit when you get older. And sometimes even that, I think, will be my case when I get older, but that part of skin will end on top of the eye, and even some people need to have surgery there to be able to see, because sometimes it starts covering the eye when you get like quite old. In our case, our character is young, is like around 35 years old, so he's not having that like too loose yet, so he had it quite tight, but as you see, there is a bit of that gravity affecting that, and we have a bit of that volume. Here what I'm doing is I'm digging the hole in the head for the eyeballs, and this is important because then when we do the retopology, we need to have that space there for the eyeball to move properly. Here I'm working a bit again with Dynamesh to adjust what I mentioned before about the nostrils and the eyes, that I worked like digging it in the head. And now I did a Dynamesh again with low resolution to being able to keep working with a more even topology. Here I'm working with the size of the eyes because I'm not happy of how it's looking. And this will be a back and forward during the entire process, seeing like how it looks with the rest of the head. In general, the eyes, they are between 22 and 24 millimeters diameter. But at this point, how we are working here, I'm not trying to respect that because I'm trying to do everything by eye, especially for you to train your eye to get that proportions right. So you can always start, for example, with the eyes, knowing that measurement, or we will adjust. In our case, we will adjust most probably the real size later, But at this point, I want to get loose and again, as I said before, like to have my eye as trained as possible. And this is a really good practice, in my opinion. Here I'm starting defining a bit more the eyelids, and this, as you will see, it will be like a long process, slow, getting it right, slow. And what is important here is that the eyelid, it needs to be quite defined, and it's not so curved as we think. And we have like a really sharp edge in the top and in the bottom. And that will be where the eyelashes will be placed later. And they are also, when we go to part of texturing, you will see that there is a change on the roughness and in that border. So if you see yourself in the mirror, you will see that there is like a difference of material of the skin, like in that edge, that change. Here I'm starting defining the jaw. Doing a bit Ctrl+C because I was not happy with how that was looking. And then as you see here, the shape of the skull is a bit square at the moment, the side of the eyebrows. So I'm adjusting here to get the shape a bit better. When we did our Dynamesh, we lost a bit the shape of the mouse. So here I'm defining it a bit better again. And here adding a bit more volume to the bottom lip. As I mentioned before, the mouth of this guy will be quite prominent in general. And we want that volume in the lips. Also, it's important here, as you see, I'm starting to define the shape of the lip. And you will see here how I do it and how the lip is not continuous, but it has these two small, let's say, volumes that match in the middle. And with standard brush, I define that shape. Here, making the mouse a bit bigger, as I said before. Most probably I will play a bit with that during the entire process, because depending on the rest of the head, sometimes the mouse looks bigger or smaller, so you will see me making it bigger and smaller during the entire process. Here define a bit the chin, giving a bit more volume. As I mentioned before, I go slowly in parts of the face and then I leave it and I move to something else. Again, here defining a bit more the nostrils and starting to get closer to what would be the final depth of that. Okay, now we start working on the ear. This is a part of the head that we still didn't touch much. At the moment, it's just a super basic blockout. So what we will start working on now is we start defining first the helix, like the main shape that goes around the ear. And one important comment with the ear is that a lot of people is a bit scared of it because the shape looks quite complex. But in my feeling, it's one of the easiest parts, or at least one of the parts that I like to do the most in the head, because there is so much variation between different type of ears and between different people that it ends being quite difficult to get it wrong. What is really important is to have the curves like quite smooth and not have like straight lines anywhere. So if you see now, what I do is I first define the outer helix of the ear, and then I start carving in to get like a nice surface to start working on the anti-helix, as you see that I'm working now. As you will see now, the topology start getting a bit broken here because I'm getting in and out, and then I will need to do a Dynamesh again to being able to work again on a nicer topology. So as you can see here, I'm working on the anti-helix and the anti-tragus. Honestly, again, I'm not the best with names in general, but it's good to check it once in a while, but it's not the important part. What is important is to understand the shape. So it's really important, as you see with the picture in the left, to get a good reference and start working with that reference and to try to imitate that as much as possible. So here I define the tragus, that is that small thing that is in the front of the ear. And as you see, what is important is to get that curve from the front, if you see it, and to not do it completely flat. How when you see a lot of beginner artists do it like the ear that looks that is something awkward is in general because it's too flat. Here, as you see, I'm having because the surface, it gets too close to each other at that point, I'm getting that issue that I will need to solve later. But at the moment, I will keep going now and keep it like that. And then in the next video, I will sort that out and I will show you how to solve a problem like that. So I took some time to realize that, and being honest now, seeing it from outside, I would tell you that I should work with better with the back face mask, and I could solve it in another way. But what I decided to do in that moment was to bring a cylinder or any shape, and then I cover the hole, as you see here, cover the hole, and then I will do a Dynamesh again, so to solve this issue. So in this way, I show you how you can solve problems like this when you have holes in the mesh and stuff. So as you see here, I merge both shapes and then both subtools, and then I do a Dynamesh, and I have already like a better shape there. So now I keep going in the ear. And as you see, until now it's starting to look a bit too flat, as I mentioned before. So now I started defining better the helix around and doing like a nice curve inside of it to get that shadow as you see from the side. As you see here, I'm carving in that hole that has all around the helix. And defining the anti-helix best as possible, trying to match the reference. As you see, slowly start to get like a similar feeling that what we have with our reference. Then once I get more or less the shapes how I want it, I start with the move topological in general. Like I start defining a bit more the size and adjusting it like by eye to see and check what I like the most. Something important with the ear is to to get really well defined that separation between the rest of the head and the ear, and not like that is sometimes we tend to do it like more connected in the top, but it's good to have that V shape that you see in the top between the side of the head and the ear itself. Because as you see in the reference, is quite defined. Now that we have the elements of the head a bit more defined, I jump to the neck and the chest and the back. So when we are doing a bust, even if our focus is the head, it's really important to get the neck right and the muscles also of the chest and the back. Because if not, our head will look like a bit awkward if it's not all connected together. So in this case, what I will do is I did a Dynamesh again, subdivided a bit, and now starting adjusting the shape of the neck and give a bit of curvature and giving a bit more volume in the bottom to get a nice surface to build the muscles and the clavicle there. So as you see here, slowly with the clay buildup, starting removing part of the sculpt there to define the clavicle there and the muscles, the pectoralis. So here at the beginning I exaggerated a bit, and then I will smooth it and get the shape a bit more natural. As you can see here, I started building the trapezius in the back. And you will see that there is like a nice hole, let's say, between the trapezius and the pectoralis. And that's important to get it right. If not, everything will look quite awkward. So keep building slowly. What I like for muscles is I use the clay buildup and I try to go perpendicular to the shape at the beginning to build volume, and then parallel to the direction to get a bit of texture, let's say, in the muscle. And then in this case I smooth a bit to get it a bit smoother. Now I'm shaping, as I told you before, I jump from one side to the other of the head, and I'm shaping to detail a bit the eyes because it was annoying me that because of the Dynamesh, like that was looking quite awkward. So I started defining slightly more the upper and lower eyelid, and to get more volume because it was looking a bit too flat. Working a bit more near the eyebrows and starting defining a bit the wrinkles there to get slightly a bit more expression, because I like to have, as soon as I can, a bit of the personality of this guy. And then keep working on the nasal labial and the zygomatic bone. Again, back a bit to the muscles of the neck and the chest, and adjusting and giving a bit of curvature to have a more natural position. As you see, the head is not completely straight from the side, but we have always a bit of curvature in the neck, as you see in the reference in the bottom left. Here, starting defining a bit more the eye. I all the time come back and forward to the eye because it's one of the most important part of the body. And once I add it, well, okay, a really important point is the matter of like I jump from one place to another, because if we had really defined one part and then the other one not enough, it will still look awkward. So I like to go slowly and keep defining the different parts of the body, of the head, in the same level all the time. As you saw in the previous lesson, we had some issues in the ears of this guy. And there are, like, when I was trying to do the Dynamesh, we had a hole in the mesh. So there was a problem. And even here, as you see, while doing the Zremesh, we have a bit of a messy topology there. And the mesh is completely broken at that point. So what I will do here is I will show you how I did to fix it and how I tried to do it first and it didn't work. So at the beginning, I tried to match the polygons as much as possible and see if I would do like a Dynamesh of subdivided, it would solve it, but it didn't, as you see. So what I did is I tried something similar to what I did last time, that is to add a mesh, a subtle. Well, that what I will do in this case would be I will add a IMM tool that you will see it soon, and I will fill the hole with that mesh, and then I will do a Dynamesh with that. So for this, I go to the IMM brush, any of them, like could be that or could be like a cylinder or anything. It doesn't need to be something special, but I just went to one of my IMM brushes and I find a bolt and use it to fill the hole here. So as you see, I just scale it up. I just have a problem at the beginning, as you see that it was the gizmo was not scaling it from the center. So what I did is I center the pivot and then I scale it up and I put it in the position to cover the entire hole. I place it in the proper position to cover everything. And then I realized that when I mirror the mesh, like it's not exactly the hole is not exactly in the same place in both sides. So what I will do at this point is I will do a mirror and weld to get the hole in the right position where I want. So both of them the same in both sides. And then once I did that Dynamesh. And as you see, the hole, you see now in the ear, the hole is solved. And we have that, we smooth it, and the problem is solved at this point. With the Dynamesh, what we will do here is a Zremesh that, as you see, because the mesh is quite dense, it will take a bit. But after it's done, we will see that it's not a really high resolution mesh, and it follows a bit more the shape of the face. So it follows the eyelids and the nose and stuff. If we would need to do this as a final mesh, we would need to put a bit more care in this Zremesh. But the only thing what we want at the moment is, as we will do the retopology in Maya later, we just want to have like a bit more of a workable geometry now. So what I did now is I use this Zremesh, subdivided a couple of times, and then unhide all the other elements, all the other subtools in the project, and do a project all with the head that had with the Dynamesh head that we had before that we duplicated. So now, as you will see here, we have the head with a Zremesh topology, but with all the same details as the previous Dynamesh head. Now, once we have the Zremesh done and a bit of a nicer topology, what we will do is bring back our reference. And in this case, I'm going to start with the reference from the drawing and forget about Jeremy for a bit. And I will start working with the zygomatic bone there. and start trying to match, like looking all the time at the reference and trying to match as close as possible the model. So slowly working on, as I told you before, the zygomatic bone, now adjusting a bit the nose and the middle of the eyebrows. And as you see, it's all really small brushes, like not like, as you can see in the brush intensity, is like I always use between 8 and 14 more or less. I never go much more than that at this point, because all the change needs to be slow. Like I tend to do like not really big changes at this point, but more starting shaping that secondary forms. So for example, like define a bit more the nose, you saw before. Now starting in the temporalis, starting defining it a bit more. So as you see, you start seeing that muscle there. Maybe at the moment it's a bit too much, but slowly it's getting the shape. Then as you see, I'm rotating the head all the time to see, because we need to remember that this is a 360 degrees model. This is not a drawing that we only need to do it from one perspective. So all the time we need to rotate the mesh, so we see whatever we are doing in one side, how it's affecting the other ones. Because sometimes we sculpt like really strong in one side, and then when we rotate, it looks horrible from the other view. Here defining a bit that wrinkle in the eyebrow, between the eyebrows. And now I'm going back to Jeremy and starting to get it a bit more human again, because when we base on a drawing from a reference or a concept art, like it could be really well done, the concept art, but it's always good to go back to the human reference to understand if what we are doing is grounded to reality. Always checking every place, every angle and everything from the top. As you see, it's always good to check that egg shape that I mentioned before, the opening of the nose. And again, at this point, it gets a bit repetitive, but is slowly adjusting. And as you see, I'm using basically clay buildup and the move brush or move topological, and that's it, not much more. Now, as you can see here, the nose is quite sharp at the moment, so what I'm doing is like defining a bit more that connection from the zygomatic bone to the nose. And as you see, it gets a bit more volume. If you see it in the reference, you can see that that's not super flat and it has a nice connection. Then I adjusted the cranium a bit. And I was feeling that the chin was a bit too low, so I adjusted a bit more the proportions of the mouse. And his upper lip, it was a bit too thin compared with our reference. So that was something important to adjust. The nose is something, it was something a bit complicated in this character, because it's not super strong shape, what he has. So I came back and forwards a bit with it. Now I started defining a bit more the eyes. And as you see here, the ears, they were a bit all too flat. So I adjusted the tip of the ear a bit inside, closer to the head, to give a bit more of a connection with the entire head. Now I duplicate the mesh, and this is a nice practice that I do sometimes is I press Shift S to move it and keep the original one, and then I check with the previous Dynamesh mesh that I have saved as another subtool, and I check which of them looks better. What we will do in this lesson is something that if you are going to do a likeness is quite important and you can use it, but in our case, we could not use it, but I wanted to show the workflow, so I decided to do it to show you how to do it. So, or how I do it. There are different ways, but what I do in general is I work with the opacity of the ZBrush itself and also with the opacity in ZRemesher. So I use the opacity from the ZRemesher to adjust the head in the proper position, the reference. And then what I do is I keep that ZRemesher in the bottom. And then I will work with the opacity from ZBrush to sculpt on top. So what I do is I work with a really big move brush, in this case, not move topological because we could have some problems. I use a move brush. So it moves the entire mesh. And in this case, I adjust the silhouette from the sculpt to the silhouette of the head that we did in Photoshop in one of the first lessons. You can store the cameras also. Again, all of this is not essential, but especially because we are not doing a likeness of Jeremy, but we are just having him as a main reference. And then our character is not going to be him exactly. So we don't need to adjust it exactly as him, but at least to show you how it can be done. This would be really a great practice to do when you have pictures, for example, from 3ds that you know that the cameras are positioned in the right place and the pictures are properly aligned and are from the same date. And in that way, you can do, if you do this quick in an earlier stage, you will have at least a good base to work on. In our case, as you see, when you adjust it at the beginning, like if you adjust to 2 views, it will never look good from the beginning. Because first of all, as we said, the pictures are not from the same day and in the same place. And also, even if it's that, like we have 360 degrees, as I mentioned before. So if you only do it in 2 angles, like from 90 degrees, like there are a lot of missing geometry or missing shapes in the angles between them. So you have 90 degrees angles that you need to adjust in, like for example, the 45 degrees, the 30 degrees. So it's good to rotate all the time the mesh and see how the mesh itself is behaving. So as you see, now I'm trying to adjust it a bit to not make it look so square. And for example, here in the temporalis, it was too flat. So now I'm adjusting it again to make it look a bit more organic. The same with the neck. Now it looked a bit flat. So I adjust it again to make it work better in the final shape. Now I'm adjusting the eyes. But as we mentioned before in the asymmetry class, not any face is exactly symmetrical. So as you see, when we adjust in symmetry and we adjust it to one of the eyes, the other eye, it won't be perfectly aligned also. So again, we take this as a reference and then we will adjust it to make it look good. What is important is to make it look good at the end, especially when we are not doing a likeness. And what we need is not him to look exactly as someone else, but we need him to look good. So as you see now, it's not looking great because what I mentioned is I try to adjust exactly to the references, as the references are not aligned properly and everything. It will start looking a bit weird. So now I keep working slowly, adjusting the head and modify it a bit the head to make it look more appealing. I'm adjusting a bit the nose, the eyes, the mouth. In this case, it's better to choose one of the sides. For example, in my case, it was the right one, and try to match to that one, because as I mentioned before, as the face is asymmetrical, like if you start matching in one side and the other one, that will fail. Now, for example, I have the sternocleidomastoid. It was looking a bit weird because it was looking a bit too narrow in the top and a bit too wide in the bottom. So now I'm adjusting it to make it look a bit more natural. And I have the feeling that the eyes are a bit too close now. So I'm adjusting that also. As you see here, I'm comparing, as we did in the previous lesson, the new mesh with the old one. And for example, there's a lot of things that I prefer from the old one compared with the new one. So what I will do now is I will start adjusting the new mesh to match a bit more the old one. Because even if the new mesh has a bit more, it's a bit closer to the reference in terms of silhouette, I don't think is giving me what I want. Because for example, you could see the mouse, the size of the mouse and everything, it was more appealing in the older version. So what I will do is start adjusting again the new mesh to match some of the things of the old one. So I kept in the left, I kept with Shift S, like the old mesh. And now I'm taking the new one and trying to match some of the things that I like from the old one. For example, the mouse, as I mentioned before, the proportions of the nose and mouth, that it was before the mouse was a bit looking too down in the head. And now I'm starting to get something that I like a bit more. As you see, this is a back and forward process, and it's not something that I can tell you like you need to do this and that and you have a perfect face. It's something that is a lot of observation and checking the reference and checking how the mesh is going all the time. In this lesson, we will keep defining the face and starting to define some secondary shapes to start understanding if our primary shapes are working correctly. So, as you see here, I'm storing a morph target. So then, as I mentioned in the previous lessons, we can go back and check if the changes we did, they're good, better or worse than what it was before. And here I'm defining more the eyelid, that it was quite bubbly in some way, like too smooth everywhere. And here the lower eyelid also. Then give more shape to the eye, because it was not really defined before. And always trying to match as close as possible the reference that we have in the left. Again, we are not doing a likeness, so it doesn't need to be exact, but at least we have that as a reference and we can understand how real life is working. And that helps us a lot to achieve a believable result here. As you see with the move topological, I keep always adjusting the main shapes. And here I'm working on the nose that at the moment is looking quite thick in the front. So I start defining it better and doing it a bit sharper. As you see, I keep using the clay buildup as my main brush and smoothing once in a while to get that smooth result in the skin. And here with the dump standard, starting to define, this won't be final, but starting to define the wrinkles in the forehead. I'm saying that this won't be final because then this will be best to do it without symmetry. but at least I have an idea of how we will start looking at the end and position it properly. So this is all a blockout, and then when we start with defining more of the secondary shapes in the next lessons, you will see that we might break this quite a bit. And here I'm defining that bone protrusion in the forehead, that if you touch yourself, you'll see that you have like two small protrusions in the front of the head. And slowly start getting this head starting to get a bit more shape. And here I'm working on the lips, defining them a bit better. And defining in the side of the lips, there is like a small dent, let's say. And just defining more the shapes and always following the reference that we have in the left. Now that we have our head in a good position, we will do a blockout of the hair. In a case like this, where our character has a really prominent hairstyle, it's good to do a blockout to understand if the head is working as what we expect, because maybe we are happy with the head alone, but then when we add the hair, it doesn't work as we wanted. So I would consider this like just as a bonus lesson, because it was not supposed to be included in the tutorials, but I did this exploration to understand a bit if the head was working. So I think it was worth to show you how I did it. And again, as I work in EdgeChain in general, I don't tend to work a lot in fiber mesh, in ZBrush. But so this is a bit of an exploration in general, where as you see, I speed up this video quite a lot because I don't want to waste a lot of your time in this case, because I didn't do something specific to create the hair, but I did a couple of tests, as you see, working with the max fibers. I added segments to the hair to give a bit that volume, as you see. So I added 4 segments, and in some moment I would add 6 to give a bit more volume to the hair, to make it look a bit more dreadlocks. But as you see, I made a mistake here, and I started trying to move the hair with the move brush, but that breaks the hair completely. So what you need to do is to use the groom hair long, and with that you will be able to adjust the hair better, because you will keep the tip adjusted to the mesh, and then you will move without destroying the complete hair. So as you see, again, I'm not going to go in detail in which parameters I touch in each, because it was just an exploration, and I would like you to do the same, to test and to check like what each of that slides does. So you should work with the coverage to get like a good volume of the hair. Also with the max fibers. And then, as I mentioned before, the profile and the segments, they are important to get that volume. As you see here, I worked on the graphic from the lens and from the width to give that shape to the hair, and not that it's like just a tube. And then I work with the groom hair long to adjust it. But again, this was a test, and then I will realize that with fiber mesh it won't be the best for this at the moment, because I wanted to do something fast and just have an idea of how the hair will look in a matter of volume, and not so much doing it like exactly as the dreadlocks. So I decided from the beginning that I was not going to spend a lot of time on it. And as you see here, I started inflating the hair to get a bit that volume that I mentioned before. But the problem that I face here is that after I inflated it, I lost the properties of hair itself. so I decided that was not going to work. So what I did is I did a mask in the head, then I extracted it, and I decided I was going to sculpt the hair instead of doing it with fiber mesh. As you see here, I use the clip curve to cut the hair, and then with the clay buildup, I will sculpt and give the shape that I want. Again, this is super fast and super rough. As you see, I'm just working on the ponytail a bit, then adjusting the shape in the front to try to match the reference, and then masking, and with the Transpo Master, adjusted the back of the dreadlocks. This is just a blockout, so we don't need to pay a lot of attention of how it looks. It's just to understand if the shape of the head will work later with the dreadlocks in action. In this lesson, we will work in something that is a bit overlooked in general, and we tend to not work on it so much. That is the back of the ear. As humans, we tend to not see the back of the ear of people. We really don't know how it behaves. So at the moment of sculpting a head, in general, beginner artists don't work on it. Okay, if you are not going to see it because you will only do front render, it's okay, you don't need to work on it. As I always say, you need to work on what's going to be visible. But if you are creating a character that you don't know which camera angles you will use and stuff, and if you will do a turntable, you need to sculpt the back of the ear. So in this case, there is not a lot of explanation about it. What I did is I put next to, in my other monitor, I have a reference from a back part of an ear that I found in the internet, and I'm working on it, like defining that volume in the back. Again, as I mentioned with the ears, they're really different from one person to one person, but what is for sure is that it doesn't go flat directly from the head that it was before. You always have that volume and that transition from the skull, from the side of the skull, from the side of the head to the ear. Again, this is, in general, our camera is not going to focus in this side. From here, you will always only see it in a turntable, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. But it's good to have it defined. And also I'm taking advantage here to break up the ear and to not have it too flat in some areas and too straight. Seeing it from the back, you see that the shape looks much better now, as you compare with how it was before. And here I'm reworking it, and again trying to break the too smooth surface. Adding a bit more volume and giving a bit more shape to the ear from the back. Again, all of this was looking at the reference that I have in my second monitor. And that's really important in cases like this, especially in areas of the body that we don't usually see. To transfer the shape from your sculpted mesh to the new retopology mesh that you might have from a previous project, or you have a base mesh, the best thing to do is to use ZRemesher. As you see here, I'm not going to go in detail in ZRemesher because there are a lot of really easy and free tutorials in the internet. But basically what you need to do is to place points in one head, that it would be the retopologized one, like with the proper topology, and in the sculpt that you just did. So it's good to use the X symmetry to do it in both sides. And as you see, I'm adding here some points. Then when you have all the points done, you press wrapping, and then the head with the proper topology will wrap to the new sculpt. Again, I'm not going really in detail on this because there are a lot of tutorials in the internet, and I think it would be great to take a look at it. Then once you have the topology, the transfer of the mesh done, I'm having some issues that this is what I wanted to show you better. That is when you didn't sculpt the interior of the mouse in your sculpt and your base mesh has one, you need to solve it in some way. So what I wanted to show you now is how to solve it. So basically what I did is I went to display properties, I did the mesh double, so I see both sides, and then masking, we're doing topological masking with the transpose tool or with the gizmo. I mask all the head but not the interior of the mouse, and then I move all the interior of the mouse to the inside. Then as you see here, I'm starting to sculpt the mouse inside to give that volume, because the hole that we have in the mouse is quite prominent, and we need to leave space to put like the teeth and everything, like the tongue and everything that goes in the interior of the mouse. In our case, in this tutorial, we are not going to create all that because because our character will have the mouse closed, but it's good to have the opening there in case we want to add it in the future. As you see here, when we move the mouse from outside to inside, the mesh got intersected, and for some time I didn't realize that the mesh that I have there, it was the back part because I have it in double. So what I did in this case, I smoothed it, and then with the inflate tool, in pressing Alt in negative, I did it backwards, but then I realized that I didn't have proper mask in the mouse. So Ctrl C, then I mask properly the mouse, and then I inflated all the interior. For sure I have some issues here because of the masking, like the mouse got like completely broken. So in this case, what I do is I sculpt the mouse, like the lips again. And for that I'm hiding some part, I'm masking some part of the geometry and hiding it to sculpt from the interior. As you see here, I'm sculpting again the lips to give that volume and to have the mouse completely closed. Then I'm checking how the new topology adjusts to the mesh and smoothing in some areas to get the topology smoother. So now what I will do is I will do some polygroups from the mouse, because what we need to do is to project all the details from the new topology, because we resculpted the lips and everything, and we will reproject to the previous mesh. But what we need to do is to not project the interior of the mouse, because that part of the geometry, we don't have it in our original sculpt. So what we need to do here is with the polygroup from the interior, then we mask that, and then we project all the rest of the head. As you see, it might bring some errors while projecting. So what I do is, using the transparency, I adjust the mouse as close as I can to the original mesh, and then I will project again to get it done properly.